What if grief wasn't something to get over, but a doorway into deeper connection with yourself? In this episode, I sit down with Tiffani Clingin, a therapist, social worker, and mother with over 20 years' experience. She also holds a master's in trauma responsive practice, training in family therapy and psychology, and also has her own lived experience of losing a child. Tiffani brings both expertise and deep humanity to the conversation. We talk about the many faces of grief, whether it's losing a loved one, the end of a relationship, the life you thought you'd have, or simply the feeling that the world has moved on while you're still hurting. Tiffani shares how trauma and loss are stored in the body, why powering through doesn't work, and what it really takes to feel safe reconnecting with life again. This isn't just for those in grief. It's for anyone who's ever felt broken by life and unsure how to begin again. A reminder that healing is possible, even if it looks different than you imagined. Let's get into it.
So, what experience, learned or lived, helps you know about navigating life when everything feels like it is falling apart?
Well, as you know, and I've got so in terms of my learned experience, my first degree was in social work in the 90s. Um, and then about maybe 8 or 10 years after that, I'd established a private practice in the Macedon Ranges working in mental health. And I went back and did family therapy just to understand people's context better and the way we all influence each other in terms of our well-being. And then I did a master's in applied positive psychology. And then my final degree is in trauma responsive practice. So that's my, I guess they're my qualifications. I have done some mentoring for master's level students at Melbourne Uni and some supervision for the Masters of Counselling students at Monash. And last year I was teaching communication and behavioural science to chiropractic undergrads in Scotland. So that's a bit about my education. And in terms of lived experience, sadly, or maybe a better word is devastatingly, in 2021, my youngest son, Mont, died by suicide in the aftermath of a sexual assault. He'd come out as same-sex attracted and was raped on an early date and really didn't manage that very well. And to make things I guess, a bit more complex for people to understand. His death was investigated by Safer Care Victoria, and they're the body that oversees the function of all Victorian hospitals. And Monty was actively help seeking in the weeks and days before he died. So they've declared his death a sentinel event, and it's still being investigated over 3 years later. And so that's unfolding at the moment. His case is with the prevention unit at the coroner's court. And then about a year after Mo died, I found a vagina on my husband's phone, and it wasn't my vagina. um, and and that was another absolutely calamitous loss. And he and I had been together for 32 years, married for most of those years. And the discovery of that first image led to this unfolding of other disclosures and women coming forward. And it turned out that he's been unfaithful for most of our relationship. And there are some regulatory consequences for some of those relationships that he's had outside of our marriage. So that's unfolding as well. So in terms of lived experience, there's a lot at the moment. And so I'm speaking with you both as a worker, but also as someone trying to navigate considerable hardship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you, if this is probably not the best way to put it, but like, how do you get up in the morning and try and juggle I don't want to, like, I want to feel everything that's coming up, but I also don't want it to overconsume me and debilitate me to the point where I can't get out of bed in the morning and I can't go about my life?
I think meaning making really matters, Anth. And after Moe died, particularly, you knew Mont, and he was incredibly empathetic. And I actually don't know what happens after we die. I'm not one of those people that's certain that there's an afterlife or a heaven or a hell, but I suspect there's some ongoing connection. And I was acutely worried about him being aware of the impact of his death on all of us. So one of those reasons for getting out of bed in the morning is I didn't actually want him to worry.
Mm.
And if he's aware of us wherever he may be, and I was also driven by my love for my family, including my husband at that time, and I'm aware that I'm modeling to Oliver and Virginia, Moe's surviving siblings, how to deal with difficult things. And also, I don't mean this in a burdensome way, but I have a duty to my community. And I've worked for a long time with suffering people, encouraging them to embrace their experiences and gently find their way forward. And I'm aware, Anth, that some of those people are looking to me and at me to see how I'm doing this. And
Mm.
I don't hold that responsibility in a big burdensome way, more as an honouring way of others are suffering. And as I make my way forward, I discover strategies that might help other people too.
Mm. How do you do that? How do you differentiate between it not feeling like a burden or a responsibility, but it feeling like it's an honor? Like it not being as well consumed by that, because it's the same situation, but I guess your take on it is that it is an honor, and it's a lovely thing to feel, and that's the thing that gives you meaning versus going, oh my gosh, I've got my position in the community, I help people in this space, and now I'm
Yeah,
living with this.
I'm one of them. Yeah.
What do you think the difference is that helps you
Uh,
go in that direction?
oh, I think quite a bit about oscillation theory, and you and I talked about that in the conversation we had on another call. So there's and it comes from the grief literature, Anth. This idea that we can move from loss-oriented feelings and sensations to comfort, that we can have a break. So one of the things that I do is I allow myself to experience the catastrophe and the sensations that accompany the losses, and these cascading losses that have arisen from both situations, that I give myself permission to fall apart and then to sort of dust myself off and get on with things. And that does come from Strobe and Shute, and two researchers that developed this idea of oscillation theory. So for people that are listening to this, if they imagine a figure eight laying on its side, and one side of the figure eight represents these loss-oriented sensations and behaviours, coupled with permission to seek respite. And I've relied on that a lot, Anthea. And I'm not aiming for perfection either. That I understand that I'll stumble and get some things wrong, and maybe being in my 50s, and I'm okay with that. I don't know where that comes from, but I'm okay with if I get my shoes on. So one of my rules is no matter what's happening, get your shoes on. And I say that to myself in the morning, no matter what's coming, no matter what's arising. I pat my arms, I put moisturizer on, and I say, no matter what's happening, just get your shoes on. And I usually call myself darling, pop your shoes. And then I make my way as best I can, like I would encourage a client to do. So I wonder too, Anth, if I've taken that therapy voice, because I've worked in that therapy room for 30 years, the same room for 30 years, with people that are dealing with difficult things in one way or another, mostly. And I would say to them, move gently, give yourself permission to stumble, and I'll be here. And they're the things I now say to myself.
I think that's an amazing thing to hold. And I guess that's what I've come to the realization lately that that's all we all want, is we want someone, whether it's we're calling our mum because something's happened or we're talking to a friend or whatever it is, all we want is for someone to be like, it's going to be okay.
Yes.
And they're really gentle with us and maybe like, I just want someone to come and make me a cup of tea, or
Yeah.
I want them to tuck me into bed, or I want them to say these things to
Yeah.
me. And I think it's either your inner wise therapist or best friend or future self or whatever you want to call it that is like, it's going to be okay. Just put your shoes on or
Yeah.
make
Your
yourself a
mum
cup
did
of
it for
tea.
me recently, Anth. We were on the phone. I can't remember how, maybe it was about a month or 6 weeks ago. And she said something very tender, something like, I just want to wrap you up and give you a hug. And it felt this combination of motherly and sisterly. It was very feminine and gentle. But I've savoured that over and over, that sweet sentiment. I just want to wrap you up and give you a hug. And I sometimes say that with clients. I've got this craving to wrap you in a blanket. And a woman came into my workroom recently, and she was very distressed walking down the hallway. I could see it in her posture and her face, and I didn't know what had happened. And she stepped into the workroom and I said, do you need to be held? And she said, yes. And I said, let's just pause for a moment. I said, because sometimes women say yes to an offer to be held, but they might not really mean it. I just want to give you permission to say no if this isn't something of comfort for you. And she said, no, I want one. And I just cuddled her and rubbed her back, and then said, tell me everything.
Who
Uh,
wouldn't want a cuddle from you?
yeah.
Such long
most,
limbs. You're like a
most
praying
people say yes.
mantis.
But yeah, they're long-lived. And but I remember working with an adolescent once, and I often sit on the carpet and draw on my whiteboard, and I just had this sense there was something in her posture, and I was on the whiteboard, she was sitting in a chair, and I said to her, am I too close to you? I said, I've just got this sense that I've moved physically too close. And she said, yes, I want you to get back. And I said, how brave of you to answer authentically. And I wriggled back right away. So that's why there's that asking, because most people say yes, Anth, but there's that one time where I was aware I was sitting too close to someone. And I was with another young person recently who was making a sexual assault disclosure, and she'd been hinting and sort of circling around this disclosure for a while. I'd begun to suspect that she'd been hurt in that way, and I said to her, how would you like me to position my body in the room with you? And she said, I don't want you to look at me. I'm too ashamed. And I said, okay. And it still moves me to tears. I said, okay. I said, what if we turn out the lights and maybe we could sit back to back? So we sat in the dark, back to back. And I reached around with her permission and held her hand. But that was all she could tolerate. And it would have been too much for her to have eye contact or other touching, or even to have the lights on. So yeah, you're right. Most people like a long-limbed cuddle, but not everyone.
I think, yeah, and I think it is a really great way for someone who is in someone's life who is going through a hard time. You're not the one going through it, but they might be a friend or a family member or something, to not go like, oh, okay, you're going through a hard time. I need to comfort you. How do I do that? I give you a hug. It's like, maybe not.
Yeah.
Suggesting, and even possibly, would you say, because I know when I'm going through a hard time and someone asks me, what do you need? That sometimes annoys me because I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't ask, like, maybe give me options. Is that a tool that could be helpful?
Yeah, really beautiful tool, a menu. So I came in to the practice recently, and Monty's sister works there, Virginia, and she was trembling. I could see in her hands, and I said to her, I can see the trembling. And I said, would you like me to be soft and comfort you, or would you like me to be firm and support you to rally? She works there as a health practitioner, and I said, would you like me to be cold and help you rally? And she said, cold. I said, okay. And so then I kept my voice lighter and firmer, and was quite matter of fact with her, because that's what she needed. So you're right, and sometimes offering people that are very flooded and very distressed a little menu is helpful. I don't like it when I would discourage bystanders or helpers to say, call me if there's anything you need, because that's actually too vague and it puts too much pressure on the suffering person to articulate if and when they want someone to step forward. So I sometimes think the best ways, we know that when people are suffering, mostly they want to be heard and understood. So if I approached you, Anth, and you were flooded and overwhelmed, I would probably point out the body signals. I might say, Anth, I'm noticing ABC. That suggests to me that you're unraveling a little. And I might say, I'm curious about what you need from me. I don't want to overstep a boundary. And one of the ideas that's popping into my mind is a cup of tea. How about I get you something like that? Or is there something else you can identify from your experience? Is there something else you'd like from a godparent? And it's that gentle dancing around, but mostly as bystanders. And if a suffering person has the courage to tell us how they're feeling, we want to avoid roadblocking them, putting up barriers to what they're saying, and we tend to put up about 12 different common barriers. So here's an example, Ant, where I'm quite nervous about public speaking. I don't like getting up on stage in front of vast crowds. I prefer moments like this one with you. I like being in my workroom. I like a dinner party for 8 more than a rowdy whoop whoop loud party. And I'm an introvert by nature, but as a general rule, if I try to share with someone, if I've got a public speaking experience coming up and I try to share that fear with someone, they usually offer reassurance. Oh, you've got this vast knowledge. I did put that on Do Not Disturb, Anth. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. We're all human.
They'll say, oh, you've got this vast knowledge, you're going to be great. So they offer reassurance, or they might give advice. They'll say, just picture the audience naked. And I actually don't want to see the people naked. Or they might say, you should be grateful. This is a dream. So they'll moralize. We do all these terrible things to people when they're uncomfortable. And I've got one girlfriend, Jane, who says it's a bit daunting standing in front of a crowd like that, I imagine. And I say, yes. And she'll say, tell me more about that. And I say, I don't want to let anyone down. And she says, oh, you feel pressure to give the audience what they need. Yes, Jane, I do. And then I feel better. I feel relieved. And one example, I had an experience of that about Mont. Recently, I was in a cafe, and I might have told you about this on another call, Anth, but I left the cafe. I'd been sitting with a group of people, and one of the other people in the group came outside, and we were walking to our cars at the same time, and he said, the others wouldn't be able to tell, but I can tell that you're sad today. And I said, you're right. I said, I feel the weight of my grief. It's in my chest and abdomen. I said, it's overwhelming. And he said to me, just think of the good times. And it was this well-intentioned advice. He was inviting me to go back across my life with Mont and savor the times that were better. And so I understood his good intentions, but it actually didn't help me, Anth. And I went to get in my car, and he wound down his window and looked at me, and he said, is it unhelpful for me to say that to you? And I said, yes.
He's very perceptive, this man.
Yes.
Yeah.
I said, yes, it is. And he said, what could I say instead? And I said, when I tell you I miss Monty, say to me, of course you do. Of course you do. And so what happens, Anth, is when people are suffering, we're so busy trying to sort of nudge them out of it. And really what we need to do is invite them, step into it with them if we can. Just say, tell me about your suffering. What's happening? So I was working with a woman earlier in the week, and she's lost 2 babies. And someone said to her, she was trying to express her grief around that. And someone said to her, well, you know, the best part of babies is making them. Go and make another. But it's well-intentioned, you see. She's trying to coax her out of this grief, but actually she needs to sit in it, and she needs to feel it, and she needs to express it to someone that can tolerate it for her to heal.
And this is what you were talking about with that oscillation, going into it and then being able to come out. What do you feel? I know for me and for other people in my life as well, a fear for me is when I do feel the deep feeling that I don't want to feel, but I go into the suffering, whatever it might be.
Yes.
One of the fears that I might have is I don't want to stay in that. I don't want that to become me. I don't want that figure 8 to be a circle now.
I know. And have you ever stayed in it?
Yes, exactly. That's the thing, right? It's knowing that it doesn't last forever. Nothing lasts forever.
It passes, right?
Mm.
Because something will happen. A young person will do something hilarious, or there'll be a distraction. Life is where the healing is. There's this waxing and waning, and in our suffering, in our grief, and we can move. We can confront ourselves. We can be confronted by our pain, and then at other times we can seek respite. And life will coax us anyway. So you'll notice it, Anth, with clients even. There'll be this deep, heartbreaking conversation. So the hand-holding while she disclosed the sexual assault. And it was interesting because it's rare for me, but I cried when she disclosed that to me because she'd been holding it for so long, and I didn't like the thought of a sister suffering in that way, a young sister, you know. But it was interesting. I remember distinctly toward the end of that appointment, we were giggling about something unrelated. So there came the respite, you see. We went into this pain, and then we were coaxed out with humour. And it just naturally happens, Anth. We have to empty the bins, or the dog barks at the door, or life calls us back. Yeah, we never stay.
Yeah, I guess it's not like you're not staying in the middle of that figure 8.
That's right.
Not fully feeling great, but not fully feeling
That's right.
the not so great feelings.
Yeah. And we're afraid. We're afraid of our kindergarten teacher taught me this lovely expression, hard to have feelings. We're frightened by them, and there's this myth that they'll flood us forever and we'll never find our way back. But that rarely happens. And if it does, occasionally someone gets so stuck that they end up in hospital, or they need really concrete, solid therapeutic intervention. But that's actually very, very rare.
Body break. Just for a moment, imagine this. What if your body was your biggest supporter, your closest friend, your most loyal cheerleader? What if it loved you fully and unconditionally, no matter what? Place a hand somewhere that feels steady and let your breath soften. Now ask, if your body could speak to you right now, what would it say? Maybe something like, I've been here all along and I'm proud of you. I'm not in your way. I'm on your side. Let those words settle and inhale and exhale. Your body is always looking out for you, and all you have to do is listen.
How would you navigate if, say, someone was feeling these negative things and maybe they were feeling it for quite some time, and they do have the little oscillations, but they may predominate into that suffering stance because possibly they've taken it on as part of their identity?
Yeah.
How do we feel them without necessarily being like, oh, I'm the one that I got cheated on by my husband and that's my identity and now I have to be feeling like this?
Yeah.
Like, how do we acknowledge that, yes, these things happened and yes, I sometimes feel like this, but it's not necessarily who I am, or I don't hold on to that so much.
Well, I think, and maybe that's a power of a bystander, and that when we listen carefully to people and we give them permission to share their pain, then they'll trust us to then perhaps step into leadership and say, this is what I see and hear, and I'm worried about ABC. But if we move in too fast into that role, sort of dragging someone out, it's a bit like trying to drag the butterfly out of the cocoon.
Mm.
It's ready. We need to give people permission. So I'm working with a woman who also has a dead son,
Mhm.
and sometimes she drinks heavily as a way of managing her hard to have sensations. So I invite her to share her grief about her missing loved one and express a lot of empathy about that, giving her permission to go to that feeling side of the figure eight. And then when we look at respite, I say to her, I'm not confident that drinking uh, from one woman to another, from one grieving woman to another, I'm not confident that binge drinking is sustaining you or giving you the respite you deserve.
Mhm.
You desperately need and deserve.
Mm.
Can we talk about other ways to manage these hard to have sensations and get you the respite you deserve?
Mm.
And then, um, look, I think there are some tragedies, there are some traumas, and where ultimately the only solution is acceptance. Has occurred for me, and I would prefer that it didn't, but it has occurred. And sometimes I'll challenge people to remember that it's one part of a fully lived life,
Mm.
and even in something as absolutely catastrophic as the loss of Mont, I try to position that in the broader context, which is I love many people, including Monty, and many people love me, and I love his siblings. And I would encourage other people to see their broader context if they're getting stuck in. So I remember years ago, I was privileged to work with a young girl who'd been sexually harmed by a Scout leader. And there was a court case, and he's now in jail. But it was very consuming, this horrendous process that this very brave family needed to walk through. Um, but at one stage in that journey, I just gently encouraged the parents to go on a date and see a movie.
Mm.
And it was a way of claiming back a normal everyday behavior that they previously loved while they also navigated this horrendous situation. So there might be scope for that with people, Anth, sometimes
Mm.
just to remind them that what they're carrying and what they're living with is one part of their human story.
It's almost like how you mentioned that the brick wall. Sometimes we're so close to a brick wall, we see no way around it, and that's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
we
yeah,
see. But
yeah,
when we step back and we see the broader context, it's,
yeah,
"Oh, I can walk the other way or walk around it," or "There's a ladder
yeah,
there," or
yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever it is, we get a bit
Yeah.
more context.
Yeah, yeah. And that carrying on, I remember after I discovered Tony's infidelity and I was so shaken. And someone said to me, "Oh, you'll never trust men again." And I knew right away, Anthea, that wasn't true. I thought, oh, Tony has been incredibly deceitful, but it
Mm.
doesn't mean all people are. So I didn't buy into that story of I can't trust anyone again, especially men, things like that. So there's work to do around the way we the meaning making that we
Mm.
apply to the experience of our lives too. And one of the myths around the loss of a child is that we can't go on without them. We can't experience happiness. Um, but it is possible, Anthea. I kind of see this re-engagement with life almost as an act of defiance. When life hands us things that are really difficult, um, we can push back and reclaim pleasure. And it's hard. It's hard.
Mm. I
Mm.
think I really loved in our previous call that you've mentioned, there was a tool and a tactic that can be really helpful when we're noticing stories, like how you just mentioned then, "Oh, you'll never trust men again," and you thought, "No."
Yeah,
The difference I think it was the difference between fact and meaning
yeah, yeah.
of what's
Fact and
happened.
story.
Fact and
Yeah, yeah.
story.
Fact
Mhm.
and story. So if I say to myself, I can't go on without Monty, that stimulates overwhelming sensations of hopelessness and helplessness and despair.
Mm.
Anthea, if I say to myself, I preferred my life with Monty here, and I'm very sad about the sequence of events that led to this utter catastrophe, and there are also other reasons for living, including him. His love for me and my love for him flows in my tissues, cells, and organs, and I can engage with life fully and hold him with one hand. But the second story, Anth, is much better for me than I can't go on without Monty. It's like if someone's been sexually harmed and they carry the story, I can never enjoy lovemaking again. That's actually not true, not necessarily true. But they're those cognitive risks that hover there for all of us. That these facts are the things we see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. And to make sense of those things, our brain is a meaning-making machine. And sometimes our brain gives meaning to things that is helpful and true and comforting, but sometimes it creates meaning that's unhelpful and untrue, and it's useful for us to be discerning in those moments and just check.
How can you, as a, it's not that we're comparing, but I do want to touch on that. A different level of hardship might be, say, for instance, in my life, I have a lot of single females, and a lot of them say, there's no good men out there. It's terrible dating. It's all this like stories, right? So if someone's making up stories that are slightly more trivial, how can we either pattern interrupt our own stories or help gently the people in our lives, whatever the story is in whatever part of their life it is, interrupt it for them?
Well, the first step is to say, so let's use that example. Dating's fraught with danger, isn't it? Some men like to say we're talking with a heterosexual female friend. Some men like to murder ladies even, don't they? Like the reality, we can join where they're at.
Yes.
Which is, so when I went on one of my first dates after all the catastrophe, I peeked in the back of the man's. He had a station wagon, and I peeked in the back, and he said, "Are you looking in my boot?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "What are you looking for?" I said, "Oh, rolled up plastic and a shovel." I said, "Some men like to murder ladies." And I said, and then the headlines aren't very flattering. It'd be something like, "Dumb idiot got in station wagon with man she met in cafe, and now she's in a wheelie bin full of acid." And we had a laugh about that, right? So if a girlfriend said to me, "Oh, there's no good men out there," I'd probably join her.
Yeah.
And say, we hear terrible stories, don't we? We hear terrible stories. And everyone's got a quirky or bizarre or weird story to share. Thankfully, touch wood, not many of us have stories at that tragic end. But we can join them and say, yes, there are terrible stories about dating. And I also I know and meet and connect with good men all the time. See, this is where I'm lucky at because of my work. I knew a lot of lovely men through my work, and I've got 6 brothers, and you've got brothers. Like, we actually know there are good men, but the pathway to finding the right one can feel arduous and overwhelming for some. So maybe we can normalize. It's a long, blurry answer. Perhaps we can normalize how they're feeling and then also challenge them if they're getting really stuck.
And that's what we can do for ourselves in anything. It's like, oh, I'm struggling with making money or trying to pursue things in my career, or I want a family and we're not falling pregnant, or whatever the hardship might be in your life. It's the facts, but then also the meaning that we've made of it.
And I just sometimes ask, what am I thinking about this? Is it helpful? Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it true? So when I applied to do the Masters in Positive Psychology, I just had this idea in my head of that being fancy, maybe because it was at Melbourne, and I'd done my undergrad and then I'd done a couple of postgrads, but not a Masters, and I hadn't done a Masters at Melbourne. And a voice in my head said, you won't be able to keep up. And it also said the cohort wouldn't want me there. And I don't know why, but I just felt this insecurity going into the program. And so I said to that voice, you actually might be right. Those ideas of yours might be true, but I'm going to lean in anyway and give it a go. And I did really well academically. My marks were good, some of the strongest in the cohort. And I made a lot of friends, and I was asked to be a mentor for the students in the year below me. And was put on some welcoming panel for other people that were coming into the program. And so the voice was wrong. And so another strategy is just to check the evidence when we have a thought, to ask, is it true? What's the evidence? And so if we're having the thought there's no good men, actually for most of us, if we look across our lifetime, we'll be able to identify really good men. And we witness that in our friendship groups, and in the relationships that are around us as well. So the evidence says there are no good men is a thought that's untrue. And it's unhelpful.
It almost seems like the general theme of what you've been mentioning is that it's connecting to that, whether you want to call it intuition, the inner therapist, the inner mother, the inner whatever it is, that wise voice, and also being able to hold two truths, many truths,
Yep.
and oscillate between them. That seems like a general theme in everything that you've mentioned.
Yeah. Just I think underpinning all of that too, Ant, is maybe just this lovely general sense of curiosity. Just not be too certain about thoughts or behaviours that really limit us or hurt us, and stay curious. We want to tease those out and push back against those a little, and then the ideas and behaviours that nurture and support us, do more of those. Sometimes it is that simple. I met a young person in practice the other day, and I said, one of our jobs together, I said to her, if you choose to work with me, if you choose to hire me, is we're going to identify thoughts and behaviours that are helpful for you, and also ones that might not be. And we'll push back a bit against the not helpful ones, and we might polish up and enhance the ones that are working. Is that okay? And she said yes.
You know your body better than anyone. So why do your test results say everything's normal when you don't feel normal? Fatigue, bloating, period pain, mood swings, anxiety, these aren't random. Your body isn't broken, and these symptoms aren't just something you have to live with. They're signals that something deeper is going on. That's where Test Your Fundamentals comes in. Using a hair tissue mineral analysis, or HTMA, this test gives you a 3-month report card of how your body's been functioning, internally and externally. It shows you exactly what's happening beneath the surface, so you can stop guessing and start listening to your body in a different way. Unlike standard blood tests, HTMA reveals nutrient imbalances, heavy metal exposure, and deficiencies that could be impacting your energy, hormones, metabolism, and mental clarity. It doesn't just tell you what's happening, it tells you why. With Test Your Fundamentals, you'll get a personalised HTMA test, an easy-to-understand breakdown of your results, access to practitioner-quality supplements tailored to your body's needs, and lifestyle recommendations to support all 4 of your fundamentals, so you can take action that actually makes a difference. If you've been told that everything looks fine, but you know something isn't right, it's time to dig deeper. Visit femalefundamentals.com.au to order your Test Your Fundamentals hair test today. There's also a link in the show notes. It's not what's wrong with me, it's what's my body trying to tell me.
So how do you? Are there some easy sort of takeaways for the listeners to be able to go, oh, how do I polish up the positive ones and identify them, and how do I maybe push back against the negative ones?
Well, potentially too, Anth, just a bloody good look at what helps me, like when I'm stuck and suffering. So the other day I was really anxious. There was some things arising about Mo's case with the coroner that were kind of potentially going to crash into things about some of the stuff with my ex-husband, Tony. And I had knots in my stomach, and I was shallow breathing, and I was finding it hard to catch my breath. And I did 2 things. I went and washed my car, and I got my nails painted, and I felt better.
Yeah.
And if I knew from experience that if I sat still for too long inside the house ruminating, that wouldn't be helpful for me. So I washed the car and got the nails done. And I think one of the suggestions I'd like to make for listeners is that you actually literally get a piece of paper, draw a little line down the middle, and on one side, in one heading, they might write move toward. And under that, they put a list of all the behaviours that are helpful for them. And on the other side, they might write move away. and put a list of all the behaviours that are unhelpful. And so for my beautiful grieving mother that I'm working with, binge drinking, we would put that in the move away column. And she also does weight training, and weight training we would put in the move toward column. And it's useful for us to know that about ourselves, what works, what doesn't, and write it down. So then when we're flooded and overwhelmed, we've just got to get to the list. I
Yeah.
find it pantry.
Not next to the alcohol. Maybe next to an apple or something like that. Well, they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
That's right, Ed.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom so far.
It's a pleasure.
I just had a couple of final questions for you.
Go for it.
When we are struggling and we are feeling the emotions, but we're also going about our day and we're knowing that there's two truths, many truths can be happening at once. When someone asks, you might be getting a coffee and they say, hey, how you going? How's your day? And you might be feeling that, I'm going through the motions of I need to go wash my car and get my nails done because I'm
panicking,
a little bit on the edge. How do you answer them honestly without making your barista your therapist?
Oh, well, I've got a few strategies. So one is a deflection strategy where if someone says to me, Tiff, how are you? And I don't want to step toward it at all, I just say, how are you? And most people don't even notice. So I just switch it around to them. The other thing is I like a dual answer. So sometimes I'll say, I'm navigating the complexity of the coronial process for Mo, if it's someone that knows about that. Or I have to do some difficult writing today. For example, if someone asks me that may not know what I'm having to write about, I have to do some confronting, difficult writing, and I've got knots in my stomach about it. But on the other hand, the liriopes that I planted a few months ago are beginning to flower.
Okay.
And I was speaking with my goddaughter and I'm having lunch with a high school friend. So I do this and I'll usually pick one and one. So I might say I have to do some difficult writing today and I'm a bit daunted about that. And on the other hand, I'm speaking with one of my godchildren. Or on the other hand, I noticed this morning the liriopes that I planted a while ago are beginning to flower. And that reminds me of the seasons, and I like that. It reminds me that things become more beautiful with time. I like that. So that dual answer can be good. And in the aftermath of the catastrophe, whether losing Mo or the change in my family structure with all the things that unfolded with my ex-husband that are unfolding, when I went back to work, and especially with people that knew about the loss of Mont, was really relevant. People came into the room desperate to know how I was, and it was this huge elephant between us. And when people asked how I was, I said, I'm limping forward and I'm well supported. You don't need to care for me in here. In here, I care for you. So I do a bit of that too. I'm muddling, I'm limping, I'm shuffling forward, and I'm well supported. How are you? So then it's tell me about you. How are you? So I've given this authentic answer, but not positioned them as my carer.
It's almost like you've been doing this for, 30 years. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing those. I'm going to keep some of those for myself, and I'm sure the listeners will too.
Yeah, they're handy.
Yeah. Now, as you know, this podcast is called What's My Body Telling Me? And I've written the book, What's My Body Telling Me?
Yeah.
So when someone may be shaking or they feel certain sensations in their body, is there any ways from a therapist perspective that they might be able to understand what emotion they are feeling from the sensation? Because I know when I used to think that I was very, very attuned and aware of what the body was telling me. I used to be like, when I was 8 years old, that person has a thyroid issue because I can see this and I can do all these things. But I personally was actually shutting down a lot of my emotions and wouldn't understand how I felt until I started to pay attention to the actual physical sensations in my body. So are there any particular sensations in the body, or do you use this tool with patients or clients that they might be like, I'm feeling shaky in the hands, that might be telling me this, or I'm feeling the heaviness in my chest, I'm feeling the knot in my stomach, I'm feeling these things. And they might be people that are just sort of becoming aware of it.
Yeah.
And it might feel unsettling.
Yeah.
So what would you say to those people?
I'll sometimes say, tell me what you're noticing in your body. So what I'll do if someone's very distressed, if I'm out and about in the community, for example, and someone's distressed and I notice, I'll usually approach. And so someone might be, I think I used the example last time we spoke, Ant. I was in David Jones with Virginia. We were actually getting a dress for Jeremy's wedding. I remember your brother.
For the listeners, Virginia is
My
Tiff's
daughter.
daughter, and Jeremy is my younger brother.
Yep, perfect. And we were getting a dress for Jeremy's wedding, and we were getting Jen was getting a bit overwhelmed. She couldn't find one, and I said, "Let's go to the cafe and sit for a moment and have a break." But next to us on an adjoining table, there was a woman sitting, and she was holding her head in her hands, and she wasn't looking at a phone. You know, it's common now that people will be looking at a device. And I spotted her, Virginia spotted her, and Virginia said, "Go on then." and over I went. And I said to her, I'm not sure how you'll feel about the approach of a tall blonde stranger. I said, but there's something about the way you're holding your body that made me wonder whether or not you're okay. And she said, I'm not okay. And I said, how about I sit with you for a moment? I said, would you like me to sit with you for a moment? And she nodded. And I said to her, what are you feeling? And I guessed for her. I said, is it panic? And she said, yes. So there was just something about the way she was holding herself. Her hands were trembling. Her breathing was shallow. So I identified it for her, or sort of led her there. And so we can do a bit of that with people. And if we have a broad feelings vocabulary, which you would as a practitioner and I do too, we can sometimes make a guess and help people locate what might be happening for them. Or if I'm in my workroom, I might say, describe those bodily sensations. What are you noticing at the moment? And then I'll say to them, what might that be telling you? And then they sit and they might say, I'm frightened or I'm scared or I'm feeling hopeless or overwhelmed. And as practitioners, we begin to know what that looks like in someone's posture and presentation. So we can act as a guide. And but we can also just sit and wait and say to the person, what's happening for you? What is that telling you? Yeah. So the woman that I hugged recently, I said to her, what's happening for you in your body? And she said, Tiffani, I can hardly breathe. I said, I noticed that too. I said, it's in the chest, isn't it? I said, and that's not enough. I said, how about we practice breathing in together so the belly comes forward like Father Christmas? And then we might breathe out and flatten the belly like a supermodel. Which made her laugh, the Father Christmas supermodel idea. And I said, perhaps we could do a couple of rounds of that together if you like. So again, it's this invitation, if you like, because she's the expert, you see, not me. If you like, we could breathe together. And then her nervous system started to settle down, and then she could tell her story, what led to these sensations of where did the shallow breathing come from. And she'd been really hurt. She had very hurt feelings from her boyfriend. She'd had a death in her family, and he didn't come to the funeral, and he didn't buy her flowers. And she messaged him to say, can I come and stay with you? I'm sad. And he said, I'll give you a day and a time, and never got back to her. So she was sad. She was actually sad and overwhelmed.
Good. Yeah. Which is, in that context, absolutely fair enough.
Yeah. Yep.
I think she should get rid of the boyfriend. I think that's what a boyfriend.
One professional coming from a professional.
Exactly. Coming from a professional.
I hate his guts.
I love that. And that's often a tool that I now do for myself. When I wake up in the morning, I'll do a body scan.
Yeah.
And I'll go, oh, okay. Oh, I'm noticing tension here, or oh, I'm noticing I can't get a full breath in, or I'm feeling tightness in my gut. Or maybe we can extrapolate it out. I work with the physiology more broadly, and we go, oh, maybe you're not using your bowels regularly. And that's telling us maybe you're holding on to something. What are you holding on to? Because your physical body's doing that too. So that's a really great tool. Thank you for sharing that. So I wanted to end on this question.
Okay.
And I asked this of all the expert podcasts that we do. If you were to give birth to a little baby girl tomorrow, a sibling
Yeah.
for Virginia
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Oliver,
Yeah, yeah.
what's one belief about her body and life that you would want her to carry for the rest of her life?
Well, I would probably be really upfront about life comes together and then falls apart. Life comes together and falls apart. And I would want to gently but hopefully encourage her to expect that, so she doesn't panic when there's a pulling apart or a falling apart, when something doesn't go her way. That's a part of the lived experience. So I would want to talk with her about that gently and hopefully. And I would probably also say to her, and when life falls apart, I'll be here with a community of other people to support and care for you and nurture you. And then about the body, I would encourage her to love it. I was with a friend recently and they made a disparaging remark about their body. And then they made a playful, teasing, but disparaging remark about mine. And I said, I just want to pause for a moment. I said, I'm not going to join you in saying something cruel about your body or about mine. I said, because I've sat with too many people that have taken far too long to love what their body does for them. And so somehow, I'd want to have that conversation with her too. This idea of honouring and accepting the body she's given, listening to it, loving it, affirming it. But I think that's a complicated area of life for lots of people. But that's what I want for her.
Amazing. Tiff, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Have a beautiful day. I love you heaps.
I
And
love you
much
too.
love to anybody listening too, especially trauma survivors and anyone else that's doing something really tough at the moment. If it's a life falling apart time for them, my heart's with them and with you, Anth, always.
Thank you. Okay. Oh. Please remember, this episode is for educational purposes only. Always consult a qualified health practitioner before making any medical decisions. Every body is different, and so is every healing journey.